Well, guess what, Peter? Go ahead, my dear.
All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so I can pull my presentation up. Before I do that, may I just introduce myself, Joan, as you suggested. Peter Robinson, the Chief Marketing Officer with Lightspire Virginia. We are formerly known as Virginia Baptist Homes. We changed our name a few years ago because people assumed you had to be Baptist to live in our communities, and kind of got tired of answering that question. We wanted people to know we're open and welcoming to anyone. So I worked here about 13 years, and prior to coming to Lifespire, I worked at a company called Sunrise Assisted Living, or today's known as Sunrise Senior Living, which is an owner and operator primarily of standalone assisted living and memory care communities across the country. I, got an email from Cynthia about speaking with this group and was happy to do so. And as soon as I saw the name of the group, it made me think of, my time growing up. I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley and had severe asthma, a lot of struggles as a child, breathing, and the treatments 35, 40 years ago weren't what they are today. And my parents didn't necessarily want to take me to the doctor because it was expensive. So, we tried a lot of treatments and asthma attacks, and sitting over a steamy sink and shower or whatever, and a lot of uncomfortable nights where I was having trouble catching my breath. So certainly, your all's group, Breathmatters, is something I can personally relate to. So happy to be here today and speaking with you all. I'll be speaking a little bit about long-term care options, senior housing options. Really, as an industry, I'm going to talk more specifically about options in Richmond because I understand that's where most of you are located. Lightspire Virginia is a company that owns continuing care retirement communities, or CCRCs. So I talk a little bit more about that option, but I want to leave time at the end of my presentation to answer questions, anything related to long-term care, senior housing options that you all may have a question about. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation. We tested this last week. It worked great. So can everybody see my screen? All right, good. Let's see. There we go. So as I mentioned, I'm with Lightspire Virginia. For those in the Richmond area, you may have heard of our community Lakewood or Lakewood Manor. And a little bit about my background: studied history at James Madison University and received a master's degree in health systems management in 2010 from George Mason University. Okay, so here's agenda for the day. I'm going to give an overview of options and costs of senior housing. What is a CCRC? Contract options, long-term care insurance, how that works with senior housing. Entry fees, structures and options in CCRCs, and tax implications. So, the person that's out there shopping for senior housing today, there are really a lot more options than there were 30 years ago. It used to be your standalone nursing home. You hire someone to come into your home, or there were a few communities, CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities, that were out there. But that has really changed over the last 30 years. Really around the early 1980s, we started to see a lot of standalone assisted living buildings starting. In McLean, Virginia, actually, Paul and Terry Clausen were the founders of Sunrise, one of many of the early assisted living companies, for-profit company, and they started in a nursing home and renovated it. They lived in it, and it was kind of like their home. And Sunrise grew to 300 to 400 plus communities across the state, communities in Canada, communities in England, massive growth. But, it's a different model. Before that time, it was nursing homes. Assisted livings were really built on a residential style model. Why do you have to be in an institution if you need long-term care? That was, I think, one of the fundamental questions the Clausens were trying to answer when they were starting Sunrise. But continuing care retirement communities traditionally are campus-style communities, and any of you from the Richmond area may be familiar with Cedarfield, Lakewood, Westminster, Canterbury of Richmond, or some of the well-known CCRCs in the Richmond area. They have all the levels of care on one large campus: independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing care, and often rehab facilities as well. What we started to see in the 80s was the components of that CCRC model started to be broken up, and that's where the Sunrise living model came in. Had individual buildings where all they did was assisted living. There was no continuum.
Forever.
Had memory care.
Right. And finally, she said, "I can't find this account. This is not right."
Okay. There's somebody that does not have their mute on.
I said, "It's a gas account. It's a savings account."
Okay. There is somebody
Which I said that when I
have their mute
can
on.
only
I
savings account.
cannot mute you.
Right. Closing it. So she goes back in and she looks. She said,
Oh my
"Carrie
goodness.
Housen and Carol Housen." Yes, that's right.
That's okay.
Okay. There is somebody
I think
is not muted that cannot mute yourself. It's the cell phone whose number is 594-7093.
We're going to go. I don't like Bank of America. I don't like Wells Fargo.
How about Capital?
They have a bank.
Yeah,
There's the one around here. I don't want to go over there.
there's one in Short Pump.
There is?
Yeah.
What about Bank of Essex? There's one right
All right.
there.
Wow.
it just kind of keep
All right. Well, first we're going to reply before we do that.
Yeah.
All right. So what are you doing?
Doing this.
What is it?
Okay. Hello.
Oh, this is your meeting. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right.
I think it's Mr.
I'm going to get out and come back in and see if I can come back in the way I properly
I
should
know, but I
able
think
to turn that person off.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's actually Herb, and I just tried to call him.
Nothing.
Okay, Herb.
Lunch.
Herb.
No, I know. That's why.
And
And they're going to have a picnic on 27th. I'm just. In case you wonder where I am that day.
you're out of the house.
Now we just went dead.
Hey, Herb, can you mute your screen? Do you know how to mute yourself? We were having trouble talking over you. All right, we'll go ahead here. So, we have in the 80s kind of the standalone components of long-term care coming out of the continuing care model. The continuing care model, components of it were being built. The big difference is, companies like a Sunrise that were building standalone assisted livings, they were for-profit companies. Continuing care retirement communities are typically faith-based, Baptist affiliated or Catholic affiliated of some form, and they were typically built to meet a need in a certain community. Our company, Virginia Baptist Homes, was founded in 1948 in Virginia as a place for Virginia Baptists to go that didn't have anyone else to care for them or anywhere else to go. So, big difference from the founding of CCRCs and kind of their mission base versus standalone assisted living or memory care that we see today.
So I took another 50 out.
One component. assisted living, memory care, nursing care, they operate on a rental basis, meaning you just pay month to month on a 30-day lease as you go. Continuing care retirement communities typically charge an entry fee. So, a very different model. Some people just prefer to say, I'm never going to go to senior housing of any form. I want to, avoid a nursing home at all costs. And their plan is to just hire a private aid or caregiver one day if they ever need care. And another trend we're seeing are active adult communities. You may have heard of some of these. Those are kind of your 55 plus communities where some maintenance is included, but there's typically not a long-term care component of residents if they need some care. Let's see here. So I talked a little bit about the not-for-profit and for-profit side of the industry. Remember, the not-for-profit side are those continuing care retirement communities. That's represented by the blue line at the bottom. And you can see kind of in the early part of this century, there was a little bit of growth in the not-for-profit side of the business, but then the for-profit side, which would be kind of your standalone assisted living, memory care, independent living rentals, really started to take off. Then we had the Great Recession, and everyone stopped building long-term care and senior housing options. But it didn't take long for the for-profit side of the business to really take off. That's what this line is showing. Those are your Brookdale, Amortizing, Commonwealth Assisted Living, Sunrise Assisted Living. That's what those communities are on the for-profit side. Not-for-profit side has stayed fairly level. So today, a lot of people, when they think of long-term care, they think of the Sunrise, the Brookdale, the Discovery senior living options, a lot of the ones that are more well-known in the Richmond area. They don't think as much about, Lakewood or Cedar Hill as they did, 20 or 30 years ago. So I personally think there's a large difference in not-for-profit and for-profit when you're looking at the long-term care spectrum of services. And I think they both have a place that they both serve a certain consumer. So I'm just going to go through some of the differences here. Not-for-profit, remember, this is typically the CCRC, Continuing Care Retirement Community. They're managed by a volunteer board, stable ownership with a long-term outlook. For-profits are typically, real estate developers that are developing a piece of property, building it, and there's frequent turnover in ownership. At Lakewood and Richmond, we have a resident that's been there for 36 years. So, when we are writing a contract with a resident today, we have to have a long-term outlook. We expect that resident, coming in today might live with us until 2050. We never know. On the for-profit side of the business, the developer and owner of that community may be thinking a lot more short-term because their plan could just be to buy and sell in a year or two. There is certain tax deductibility if you're a resident of CCRC. A portion of the entry fee and the monthly fees you pay are deductible as a medical expense. Same in the for-profit long-term care sector if you're in assisted living or nursing care. If you're in independent living, that's not the case. Another key difference on the not-for-profit side is there's benevolent assistance if you run out of money. In a rental for-profit assisted living style community, there typically are no funds available if you run out of money. You have to go somewhere else. And oftentimes that is finding a nursing home bed on Medicaid. But this is a key question to ask for anyone that's shopping for long-term care. What happens if I run out of money? You really want to focus in on what the answer to that question is. Underwriting process. So, a lot of people find it. It can be confusing. You know, what are the requirements to move into it? You know, for a place like Lakewood, or Cedarfield, or Westminster, Canterbury, you have to go through a medical qualifying process and a financial qualifying process. For, you know, a standalone rental assisted living building, there are minimal qualifications to move in. There's no financial qualifier other than you just have to be able to pay your rent for the foreseeable future, because that community, if you're not unable to pay, they ask you to move out. You know, Lakewood or Cedarfield, other CCRCs, they don't do that. So they do require some financial qualification up front. So continuing care retirement community, there is still a margin in the business. Just because it's a not-for-profit doesn't mean there has to be no margin. The difference is where that margin or profit goes. In a CCRC, the money is reinvested back into the community, capital expenditures, or, you know, better benefits are paid for the staff. In a for-profit venture, the profit goes to the shareholders to decide what they want to do. So another big difference there. Quality of care, you know, there have been a lot of studies. I don't say this to lead anyone to say that all for-profit rental, you know, assisted living, memory care, or independent living places provide bad care. That's not what I'm saying here. But you know, studies have shown in not-for-profit hospitals as well as in long-term care, staffing ratios are typically higher, quality scores are typically higher versus for-profit operations in health. So something to consider when you're shopping. So as I already mentioned, you know, if you were to move into a continuing care retirement community, you have to disclose a full financial profile. And what they're looking for is, do you have enough money to pay for your actuarial life expectancy? I mean, if you're 65, your life expectancy today is another 18 years, roughly. So that CCRC is going to look to see, can you afford to stay there for 18 years? And, you know, if the answer to that question is yes, you're qualified. Also, you know, with a health qualifier, you have to demonstrate the ability to be able to live independently. And, you know, they're essentially saying, does this person have an imminent need for care? That is, you know, the basic health qualifier to move into a CCRC. So, talk briefly about costs here. And, you know, all the costs I'm going to talk about here on the next few slides are taken from Genworth's cost of care survey. If you haven't seen that survey, it's a really, really good tool. You can just Google Genworth cost of care survey, and it lets you look at the cost of long-term care on average in your area, wherever you are across the whole country. You can look it up. These numbers are straight from that cost of care survey. So independent living rental, I didn't talk quite as much about that, but we are seeing quite a few of those. There's a place called Tuckahoe Pines, Patterson and 288. It's independent living rental, getting ready to open. You know, there's a place called Discovery Village, and you know, a lot of these places where it's independent living rental. You come in, you rent an apartment, they have some services available to you, maybe some housekeeping, maybe some maintenance, maybe even some dining, but there's no care. There's no nursing care attached. Sometimes there'll be an assisted living attached, not always. But they don't have a full continuum like the CCRC with nursing care and rehab on the same campus. So independent living rental typically costs $2,000 to $4,000 a month, depending on the level of amenity that's offered and the size of the apartment that you're selecting. Assisted living, $4,000 to $5,000 a month on average, and you know, again, there's some variation there depending on how new the building is, how much care you need. It could cost more than that, depending on the location. Memory care typically costs a little bit more than assisted living because the care needs are higher. Someone, you know, really needs round-the-clock supervision. So you know, that's what you can expect to pay, you know, just out of pocket as in the Richmond area as you're shopping for long-term care. Now, if you get to the point where you need nursing care, you know, nursing home, 24-hour licensed nursing care, In the Richmond area, the average price is $8,821 a month. You can share a room with someone for about $7,700 a month. At Lakewood, I can tell you the number is about $9,800 a month for a private nursing home room. So we're a little bit more than the average in the Richmond area. And then, of course, there's always the option of, I'm never going to a nursing home, never going to need that type of care. I'm going to hire someone to come in and care for me. And if that's what your plan is, the typical cost for someone needing 44 hours of care, just a private duty aid come into your house, is $4,576. That can ramp up quickly if you are someone that needs a person in your house around the clock, such as if you have dementia, or if you need help getting to the toilet, or all of your meals, or whatever it is. Some people have a son or a daughter or a spouse that can fill in gaps and help, but not everyone has that. If you need a person around the clock in your home, you can easily be looking at $10,000 to $15,000 a month. I'm also seeing, and some of you all may have heard a little bit about this. We have a nursing shortage in this country. We're seeing more and more people, home health agencies are having trouble finding caregivers. We're having trouble finding caregivers in our communities. And as the baby boomers age and begin to access care, I think that need is only going to get worse, unfortunately. So something else to consider, if you are home, will there be a person available for you at the time you're needing that care? I also encourage people that are thinking, I'm going to stay home and bring care into my home. You got to remember, that's just the cost of the home care aid. You also have to pay for the maintenance, cooking, cleaning of your home, grocery shopping, all of those things still need to be done, yard work. At the point, if you're needing care, you're probably also going to have to be paying for a lot of those other services. And, a lot of people don't necessarily think about just socializing, who you're going to be spending your time with. If you're having trouble getting around, you may be spending a lot of time with that private duty aid. But they may be one of your prime companions. So if that's the case, I hope you like whoever that person is. But that is one of the advantages. If you move to a senior housing community, you are at least around other people that are of a similar age group that you may have more in common with, and have a little bit more opportunity, socialization. So, what are the costs of a CCRC? And that is a complicated topic, yet the costs vary significantly based on the apartment size, contract type, and the geographic location of the community you're choosing. Entry fee can range anywhere from $70,000 to over $1 million. And the monthly fees typically range from $1,800 to over $5,000 a month. So, a lot of people think I'll never need long-term care. I wanted to just put a slide in here showing a fairly recent Department of Health and Human Services study that showed 52% of people that reach the age of 65 end up accessing long-term care at some point. Of those 52% that need long-term care, the average cost is $138,000. You can expect it to be more if you're in an urban area. PricewaterhouseCoopers estimates in 2017 the actual cost would be closer to $172,000. And 15% of people that access long-term care end up paying over $250,000 for the care. So what's my point here? My point is, be thinking about this. If you need long-term care, how am I going to pay for it? Where do I want to receive that care? If only one of us needs long-term care and you're a couple, would you want to move together and be somewhere? Do you want to bring someone in? I encourage you just to have those conversations and have a plan in place. Don't wait and just pretend like it's not going to happen to you. So because I gave a really wide, broad description of CCRCs and how much they cost, I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about that. First, just a brief definition. CCRCs are retirement communities with accommodations for independent assisted nursing care. They offer a continuum of care. A person can spend the rest of their life in a CCRC, moving between the levels as needed. CCRCs are also starting to be known as life plan communities. In the state of Virginia, CCRCs are regulated by the State Corporation Commission. They're also regulated by Virginia Department of Social Services and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The State Corporation Commission considers CCRCs an insurance product because they take money from residents on an entry fee with the future promise of delivering a good service. So that's why the state of Virginia considers CCRCs an insurance product. One of the variables I mentioned, when choosing a CCRC are different contract types. So I'm going to hit on the most frequent contract types that residents choose from when they're moving to a community like Lakewood or Cedarfield. The contracts are typically known as type A, B, or C. There are 4 main types. D is a rental. There are also some equity model where you kind of move in and you're buying a condo, but there's also all the levels of care in that same building. We don't have any of those in the Richmond area, so I didn't really put any information on those in this presentation, but happy to answer questions if that's of interest. So this is in the Richmond area. The type A life care contract is the most common. Type A contracts come with an entry fee, and you have access to benevolent assistance if you outlive your money. Your contract includes your housing, residential services, resort-style amenities, all on campus, and health-related services, long-term care services, with no substantial increase in your monthly fee. They are an insurance policy regulated by the State Corporation Commission and are contain a tax-deductible component. So here's an example of how it works if you're taking a type A contract. Sally moves to Lakewood, pays $250,000 for an entry fee of $3,000 a month. Sally's fee is subject to annual increases, and her fee includes meals, maintenance, utilities, housekeeping, different programming and activities, access to resort-style amenities, transportation and medical appointments, concierge services, and more. As Sally's care needs increase, she moves to assisted living or nursing care and keeps paying the same monthly fee, $3,000 a month. So the value here with a life care contract is you're never hit with $8,000 or $9,000 a month monthly fee that you would have to pay if you need nursing home care. So essentially, a life care contract contains an unlimited long-term care insurance benefit. A type C contract is also known as a fee-for-service contract. The entry fee and monthly fee is cheaper than a life care entry fee and monthly fee, but you have no coverage for assisted living or healthcare. You pay for what you use at the time you need it. Not the same tax deduction as life care, but you do still have access to benevolent assistance and some tax deduction. Type C fee-for-service pairs well if you have long-term care insurance. So here's an example. Sally moves to Lakewood. She pays $175,000 for an entry fee of $225 a month while she lives independently. That same those same fees for the life care type A contract, $250,000 and $3,000. So the type C is cheaper while you're in independent living. You still get all of the same access to the independent living services and amenities, but as Sally starts to need care in assisted living or nursing home care, her fee changes from $2,200 a month to whatever the going rate is for that cost of care at the time she accesses it. And that's why type C contract pairs well if you have your own long-term care insurance, because you can use your long-term care insurance benefit to pay for your care at the time you need it in the CCRC. I did want to just hit on a trend that's really just in the last year or so. There's something called a CCRC without walls, and there are a couple of these plans available in Richmond. The idea is you have access to the amenities and the care at a local CCRC, so you're kind of buying into a club, but you also have the ability to have care brought to you at home. You have to join the at-home program before you start to need care or services, or have a diagnosis that is going to, lead the underwriter to say this person has an imminent need for care. CCRC without walls programs, you have to be a licensed CCRC provider in the state of Virginia to offer a CCRC without walls program. If you are, you're allowed to do that. Lakewood and Cedarfield both have CCRC without walls programs, so there are options there, and probably more coming to the Virginia area. To give you just a basic idea of the financial model for Lakewood at home, you would pay $50,000 to $500 to $600 a month, and it buys you up to $1 million of long-term care coverage that the Lakewood at home social workers arrange for you, either in your home or at Lakewood. So this is another somewhat more affordable option for people out there that maybe don't want to move into a retirement community. Their goal is to stay at home. So I mentioned CCRCs and long-term care insurance. Type C contract pairs well with long-term care insurance. It allows residents to access the benefit when they need assisted living or nursing care. And if you're interested in the CCRC without walls program and you have long-term care insurance, you actually can pay less upfront to join the program because you already have some coverage. So there is a common misconception. The fee I talked about, $250,000 to move in is a lot of money to a CCRC. And a lot of people think that money is gone when I write the check. That's not the case. There are different refundability options for entry fees when you're moving into a community. They're all typically priced by an actuary and are equivalent, even though the amounts are different. So just a couple of slides on how that works. There is a fully amortizing entry fee. This is the most common type in the Richmond area. So if you were to pay $250,000, fully amortizing entry fee would amortize 2% a month, and after 50 months, that amount is no longer refundable to the resident. This is often the lowest total dollar amount up front, and so is often the most popular. You will also see a return of capital entry fees. And what I mean by that is there's a guaranteed refundable portion of the entry fee that you pay. It's often described as a 50 or 90% refundable entry fee. The cost is typically 1.5 times the fully amortizing entry fee for a 50% refundable and double the amount for 90% refundable entry fee. These return of capital plans are popular for those planning a gift in their estate. And it's something a lot of people don't think about is what happens if the retirement community were to run into financial distress. You've given a large sum of money to the retirement community that they owe you or your estate, and you don't necessarily want to be a credit to that retirement community. So something to think about and look at the finances of the retirement community before doing a refundable entry fee. All right, we're almost done here. A quick word on tax implications. A portion of the fees you pay at a CCRC, assisted living building, or nursing home are considered a medical expense by the IRS. So if you meet the adjusted gross income limits, which I believe this year are 7.5% of adjusted gross income, if you're spending more than that in medical expenses, then those expenses are deductible to you. The CCRC monthly entry fee and monthly fees are partially deductible as a medical expense, and all of the fee for assisted living and nursing care is deductible if you're in a rental long-term care facility. And I put at the bottom of this slide, if you want more information on the deductibility of long-term care, a place where you can go to access that information. I think I hit my 30 minutes. I'm not sure. I don't see Jones here, but hopefully I stayed within my time and didn't lose you all. I know it was a lot of maybe somewhat tedious information, but and more than open. So any questions that anyone from the group may have.
Peter, thank you so much. You know what? I'm going to have everybody unmute themselves so you can ask Peter any question you have.
I think that means I've answered all the questions.
Great job.
Very thorough, very detailed. Thank you.
Very, very much so, Peter. That was excellent. Thank you so very much.